For more on China-Mexico trade, let's now bring in Andrew Rudman. He joins me from Washington, and he is the director of the Mexico Institute at the Wilson Center, a DC-based think tank. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's hard to talk about China and Mexico without bringing in the U.S. It is no secret that trade friction exists between China and the U.S. How has Mexico benefited from that discord?
Well, thanks for inviting me. Great to be with you. And I think, yes, you're absolutely right. And as your previous story mentioned, there is a lot of interest in China and a lot of Chinese investment in Mexico, I think, to gain access to the North American market. North American trade, that is trade between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, last year reached $1.78 trillion. It was up about 27%. And some of that is certainly driven by nearshoring, by the investment of Chinese firms in Mexico for more production in Mexico. So that is certainly one way in which Mexico is benefiting from the friction. I think it's important to say it's not only the friction, it is also the opportunities that have derived, I think, from the response to the pandemic, from a recognition that having extended supply lines is risky. And so you've seen a lot more movement back to Mexico from other parts of the world, not just from China, and really a change in focus from just in time to just in case, where you're seeing more storage of inventories even on this side of the border, rather than depending on moving goods from further away.
Even though we're seeing trade on both sides, there still is a substantial trade imbalance. Mexico imports far more from China than it exports. What is or must Mexico do to even that out? Oil is obviously, plays a major factor right now. But how do you think Mexico will capitalize on its newly discovered and quickly nationalized lithium reserves as China and the U.S. compete to make batteries for electric cars across South America?
Well, that's a really good question, because although Mexico has discovered what may be one of the largest lithium deposits in the world, it's in a location, a very dry location, so there are going to be questions about access to and use of water, and it is not easily extracted. So I think it's going to require a lot more private sector expertise than the current government has seemed to be interested in. This government nationalized lithium and talks about managing the entire resource by the state. And I think, though, they will ideally recognize that there's a difference between owning it and managing the resource. And I hope that they will turn to those with a little more experience so that they can indeed capitalize on the lithium.
For sure. Now, tell me, what does the move to much more concentrated investment in Mexico and Latin America mean for repairing U.S.-China trade relations, and ultimately wouldn't be beneficial for all three countries to find some areas to cooperate in?
Well, I think there would. There's certainly the relationship between the U.S. and China, just as the relationship with U.S.-Mexico, which is really the relationship I know better. In both cases, there is a need to cooperate. There are so many issues that really need to be addressed collaboratively as opposed to separately or in opposition. But I think really, to answer your question, I think the fact that there is so much investment from China and by other companies as well into Mexico really suggests that the business community, which tends to be very risk averse, does not see an immediate or a quick restoration of the way things were, and clearly seems to be hedging its bets.
All right, we will leave it there. Andrew Rudman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.